Good day, everybody. It's Chris Gallagher. Thank you for tuning into the Preacher's Pen Bible class. We're in my office where some of the things happen around here, and it is Mark chapter 5 week, and we're going to be in Mark chapter 5. If you want to follow along, we're going to pick up in verse 21, and I would encourage you, if you haven't followed along in our Bible classes, to go check those out. You can find all those on preacherspen.org. You are also able to find those by going to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ then the @ Preacher's Pen, or rumble.com/Preacher's Pen. But you can find all these on our website. Also on our website, notice our newsletter. Go ahead and sign up for that. We're going to be sending a message out later today, which is Wednesday. We're going to send out on a Wednesday afternoon. Also, if you go up to the top right-hand corner, it's going to have our prayer page. You're able to submit a prayer request to us. We'll be glad to pray for you. But let's dig into Mark chapter 5 a little bit today as we go through some of this miracle information that we have. We talked yesterday about Legion, and now we talk about the woman with the issue of blood. In fact, in verse 21, it says, when Jesus has crossed again into the boat to the other side. Remember, those who were there from the city who heard that Legion had been healed, they asked Jesus to leave. He goes to the other side, and it said that a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. So he's still there, and he has all these crowds of people following him. And it says, then one of these individuals came, and it was the ruler of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when Jairus saw him, it says he fell at his feet. He implored him, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she be made well. So this man pours out his heart to Jesus, and Jesus decides to go. Well, on the journey to Jairus' house, this is what happens. It says in verse 25, there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but instead she was growing worse. What was happening was pretty significant. This woman had had a medical issue for 12 years. She wanted this to stop, so she spent all of her livelihood to get this to stop, but it would not quit. Now, just think for a moment, if you had an issue, a medical issue that you had suffered with for 12 years, and you continually are going to doctors, trying to get their care, trying to get what is going to be important to you, how would you react? Well, there's this woman, and she's got that issue. That's the background to this, but it gets better. It says, she had heard the reports about Jesus, so she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garments. Now, there's a great crowd following Jesus. If you go back to verse 24, it says a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. That means they're pressing in against Jesus, and there's all this commotion because after all, it's Jesus. And there's all this commotion, there's all these happenings around Jesus. But this woman hears about him, and she thinks to herself that if she can get up behind him and touch his garment, because notice her words in verse 28, for she said, if I can even touch his garment, I'm going to be made well. And you know this account. She goes up and she touches the hem of the garment of Jesus, and immediately, the Bible tells us this in verse 29, immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the disease. Immediately this stopped. Now, what happened? The woman had faith. She had faith in the healing power of Jesus, and she touched the hem of his garment, and she immediately was healed. Now remember, Jesus is probably moving forward. This lady touches him from behind. She probably is healed. The crowds continue to go. But verse 30, Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, he turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? Jesus said, who touched me? Now, remember, all these people are thronging about him. All these people are coming real close. There's a lot of commotion. There's a lot of kind of fame that's spreading also because of who Jesus was. There's all these people getting close to Jesus, and they're pressing in on Jesus. And somebody touched him, but I would imagine that individual touched him differently than anybody else. Everybody else was sort of an accidental touch, or maybe it was a touch on purpose, but it was one that was different because this lady knew that she needed healed. So when she touched Jesus, everything was different. Everything. Because she had faith in who Jesus was. So this was a different kind of touch. It says in verse 31, his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, yet you say, who touched me? the disciples are a little bit confused. They're saying, everybody's touching you. So what do you mean, who touched me? Verse 32, he looked around to see who had done it. So Jesus starts looking around in the crowd. He stops, I would imagine, he stops walking. And he looks around and he's trying to see who touched me. Who was it that had this different kind of touch than anybody else? And not just touch me, but just touch the garment, just the hem of that garment. And it says, as it continues in verse 33, as this account continues, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear, trembling, and she fell down before him and told him the whole truth. So imagine all of this crowd. She hears the words of Jesus. Jesus starts looking for her. She comes to Jesus. She falls down in fear. Now remember, she's healed, so she's got joy, but in fear because now she knows Jesus is looking for her. So she falls down in front of Jesus, tells him the entire story. I would imagine when it says the whole truth, she tells him of the issue of blood. She tells him of all the money that she spent on doctors, of everything, and just knowing that she could get close to Jesus. Her life is about to change. Her life is going to change. And notice what Jesus says to her in verse 34. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well, so go in peace and be healed of your disease." He says, your faith has made you well. You knew that. And faith, once again, is not just belief. I think we need to emphasize that. Faith is not just belief. Because in Hebrews chapter 11, we call it Faith's Hall of Fame. In that, we find out that faith is important because it's belief with actions. It says in verse 6 that we know verse 1 that faith is evidence and it's substance of what's happening around you. But verse 6, it says, for without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God, that's an action on our part, must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. That's this lady. She believed who Jesus was, and she knew that there was a benefit, if I can use that term, there was a benefit in being close to Jesus. So she reaches out, touches that garment, and she's made well. Jesus says, your faith has made you well, so go in peace and be healed of your disease. Can you imagine the story that she's going to tell all these people? Can you imagine this story, I use that term, but also the way that she's going to tell it, her tone and her imagination and her thoughts as she goes out to share the message of Jesus? This is such a fascinating miracle because Jesus did not specifically look at her, touch her, and say, you're healed. Instead, she came to Jesus for the healing because she had heard about his reputation. She had heard about who he was. Just as Legion at the beginning of Mark chapter 5, he had heard about Jesus and he comes to Jesus. You see, that's part of our healing. We have to be willing to come to Jesus. That's part of that belief. That's a different kind of belief because we know that even the demons themselves believe. That's what we talked about yesterday in Mark chapter 5. But here we have this very unique belief of one woman who touched the hem of the garment of Jesus. And as a result of that, she was healed. She pours her heart and soul out before Jesus, and he tells her to go in peace, and to be healed. Such a marvelous, miraculous account that's there. And what's very interesting is we can have healing through Jesus too if we will go to him. We have to be willing to go to him. We know who he is. We know his healing power. We know those things, but we have to go to Jesus. So today, as you think about this account, are you going to Jesus? I hope that you are. I hope that you're having a blessed day today. Once again, thank you for being part of our Bible class series. As we continue tomorrow, we're going to talk about Jairus' daughter, beginning in verse 35, that as Jesus is still speaking, there came a ruler from Jairus' house, or there came a servant from Jairus' house. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. But thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being part of what we do on the Preacher's Pen, because you take our classes and you follow along. It makes all of this something that we feel is necessary because we hear from you and we want to reach out as much as we can. So thank you for being a part. If we can do anything for you, let us know. Use our contact page at preacherspen.org. And hey, as always, we look forward to talking to you soon. Have a blessed day.